The decision lasted less than a minute, but its impact traveled through the royal household like a warning bell. Zara Tindall placed the Royal Emerald Brooch into Sophie's hands, as Camilla's unanswered loan request remained inside a sealed palace folder. One woman received a symbol of trust. Another discovered that rank could not force affection. And when the Queen finally understood what Zara had done, the silence surrounding her became impossible to mistake. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Zara opened the dark velvet case at Gatcombe Park. The Royal Emerald Brooch, a personal family jewel, entrusted through Princess Anne's branch rather than controlled by the crown, rested between them, with a weight beyond gold or stone. Sophie sensed this was no casual gesture. The trusted confidant folded her hands and refused, but Zara pushed the case closer. She said the piece belonged with someone who understood loyalty without demanding recognition. Sophie knew the gift carried a private verdict about service, discretion, and trust. Camilla expected a different answer. Days earlier, she had submitted a formal loan request for an upcoming Commonwealth reception, a gathering where the monarch receives representatives from nations linked through the Commonwealth and believed approval would be automatic. Instead, an aide entered Clarence's house carrying a response. The Queen read it twice, then asked whether the jewel had been reserved for another occasion. The aide paused and revealed the truth. Zara had permanently gifted it to Sophie. The request had not been delayed. It had been made impossible. The rejection cut deeper because of its timing. Zara had acted before the reception, removing every path by which the brooch might return to Camilla's reach. Worse still, Princess Anne had known. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, had neither stopped her child nor warned the Queen Consort. Her silence felt like approval, and Camilla understood the implication. This was no accident or harmless exchange between relatives. It was a decision made with full awareness of who would be honored and who would be denied. Sophie remained shaken as she touched the velvet case, while Zara watched without withdrawing the offer. Camilla, meanwhile, sat in silence, realizing that the painful question was no longer who owned the emerald. It was why Sophie had been chosen, and what Zara believed the Queen had done to lose the family's trust. But to understand why one emerald brooch became a verdict on loyalty, the private histories of Zara, Sophie, and Camilla must first be brought into the light. Behind the titles stood three women who had survived the monarchy in profoundly different ways. Zara had protected her independence by remaining outside the working royal structure. Sophie had earned influence through years of discipline and quiet service. Camilla had fought for acceptance, status, and permanence. The emerald brooch now connected all three, but not as a symbol of unity. It exposed the difference between affection freely given and authority that expected obedience. Zara had never depended on a royal title to secure her place. As the late Queen Elizabeth II's granddaughter, she belonged to the family but remained outside the working royal structure, the official group of relatives who carry out public duties on behalf of the monarch. That freedom made her difficult to pressure. Palace rank meant less to her than loyalty, honesty, and the private bonds that survived when ceremony ended. Sophie understood that world differently. She had entered royal life as an outsider, endured mistakes under public scrutiny, and slowly rebuilt herself into one of the family's most dependable figures. Years of shared duties, private gatherings, and quiet support had drawn her closer to Princess Anne and Zara, who saw how often she served without demanding jewels, titles, or attention. Camilla's path had been harder and more public. She had fought for acceptance, endured years of hostility, and finally reached the position she had once seemed unlikely to hold. Yet her household had grown increasingly focused on the symbols that confirmed that place: prominent jewels, ceremonial positions, and objects carrying royal authority. Zara saw the difference clearly. Sophie had earned trust without asking for proof of it. The Queen Consort seemed to want the proof first. Sophie closed the velvet case and told Zara the gift might wound someone. The trusted confidant feared that accepting it would look like a declaration of loyalty against Camilla, turning gratitude into a palace division. Zara remained seated, and answered that avoiding the truth had already wounded the family enough. Sophie walked toward the window, visibly shaken, while the other woman watched in silence. No aides stood nearby. No courtier could soften the exchange. After several seconds, she turned, placed one hand on the closed case, and promised that she would never wear the brooch carelessly. Zara then revealed, through their private conversation, that Camilla's formal request had not been the first attempt to reach the emerald. Palace staff had raised quiet questions months earlier, but she had refused to engage until the demand arrived in writing. Sophie's expression changed again when she learned the transfer had been completed before the Commonwealth reception, so the jewel could never be reclaimed, reassigned, or placed under temporary palace control. Camilla, meanwhile, sat with her dresser examining possible replacements. Each offered piece felt smaller than the one denied to her. She finally closed the selection book and said she would wear nothing green. But the rejection had not begun with paperwork. It had begun months earlier, when one whispered instruction at a royal ceremony caused Zara to make a private promise. That promise had been born months earlier, during a ceremony where a single whispered instruction transformed private discomfort into a family reckoning. Every royal rupture has a moment that appears insignificant until the consequences arrive. For Zara, that moment came during the Windsor Commonwealth service, when Sophie was quietly moved away from a position she had been formally assigned. The adjustment lasted only seconds. The embarrassment lingered far longer. Zara witnessed the exchange, saw Sophie conceal her hurt, and understood that the palace was beginning to reward status while taking loyalty for granted. Sophie had been chosen to receive Commonwealth representatives beside Princess Anne, a role that reflected years of work across nations connected to the crown. The Windsor Commonwealth Service was a ceremonial gathering designed to honor those relationships and place trusted royal figures before visiting delegates. For the trusted confidant, the assignment carried real meaning. It showed that her quiet service had finally been seen. Camilla's household saw the arrangement differently. The Queen was expected to stand at the center of every major arrival, and shortly before the ceremony began, she personally instructed an equerry to move Sophie farther down the receiving line. An equerry is a royal officer who carries out personal and ceremonial instructions for senior members of the family. The order was delivered only a few feet from her. Sophie gripped the program in both hands, thanked the officer, and stepped back without protest. Zara watched her expression tighten before the public smile returned. That restraint filled her with quiet fury. She saw dignity, but she also saw a woman swallowing another humiliation to protect the institution from embarrassment. Princess Anne noticed her daughter's reaction immediately. The royal veteran warned Zara not to challenge the decision during the service, knowing one confrontation could overshadow the entire event. Zara obeyed, but the anger did not leave her. Later, in a private conversation with her mother, she said silence could not be allowed to become permission. Anne gave no dramatic answer, yet her refusal to dismiss the concern told Zara that she had seen the wound too. The deeper truth emerged after the ceremony. Zara overheard two courtiers discussing Camilla's plan to strengthen her public authority through jewels, positions, and ceremonial precedents. Their recorded scheduling notes, later described in a documented household account, made clear that Sophie's removal had not been random. It belonged to a wider effort to place the Queen at the center of every important image and occasion. That evening, Zara returned home and retrieved the Royal Emerald Brooch from secure storage. She did not call Sophie. She did not announce a decision. She simply placed the velvet case on her desk and stared at it, remembering the program clenched between Sophie's hands. Weeks later, when Camilla's written loan request arrived, Zara no longer saw a request for jewelry. She saw the final test of whether personal loyalty could survive royal pressure. The answer would be delivered not through paperwork or palace intermediaries, but during a confrontation in which Camilla demanded to hear Zara's refusal directly. Camilla was accustomed to refusals being softened before they reached her. This one was different. Zara had not offered another jewel, another date, or a diplomatic explanation. She had closed the door completely. Determined to understand whether the rejection was personal, the Queen requested a private conversation. What followed was not a shouting match. It was far more damaging, a controlled exchange in which every carefully chosen word carried years of accumulated resentment. Camilla asked Zara to come to Clarence's house before the Commonwealth reception, hoping to settle the matter without senior courtiers or formal advisors. Clarence's house was the royal residence used by the king and queen for private and official work, but on that day, it became the setting for a family dispute neither woman could disguise. Zara agreed only after informing Princess Anne. Her mother told her to remain respectful, but she refused to dictate a single answer. The decision, and its consequences, belonged to Zara alone. Camilla waited beside a small table where the rejected request had been placed. Zara remained standing until the Queen gestured toward a chair. She pulled it forward, but did not fully settle back. That small distance made the truth clear. She had not come to negotiate. Camilla pressed one finger against the paper and asked why Sophie deserved permanent possession when she had requested only a temporary loan. Her voice stayed calm, yet every word carried the force of rank. Zara answered just as quietly. Sophie had never asked for the brooch. She had earned trust without demanding its symbols. The sentence struck hard because it did more than defend the gift. It suggested that Camilla's request had exposed the difference between the two women. The Queen's expression tightened, but she did not retreat. She insisted the matter was ceremonial, not personal, and argued that the Commonwealth reception required visible continuity and authority. Zara then described what she had witnessed at Windsor. She spoke of Sophie being moved down the receiving line, of the program clenched in her hands, and of the smile she forced back into place. Camilla dismissed the change as a protocol adjustment, meaning a formal alteration made to preserve the order of a royal event. Zara refused that explanation. Through the private conversation, she revealed that she had heard courtiers discussing a wider plan to strengthen the Queen's ceremonial visibility through jewels, positions, and precedence. The removal had not been accidental, it had been deliberate. Camilla slowly moved the request away, folded her hands, and asked whether Anne had encouraged the transfer. Zara answered that her mother had not needed to. She had simply respected her daughter's right to decide. The Queen then delivered her warning. Personally owned jewels could still create institutional consequences. Zara left, knowing the dispute had moved beyond hurt feelings. It was now heading toward the king. And once the brooch became a question of royal authority, rather than family sentiment, Charles was forced to decide whose power the crown would protect. The dispute reached King Charles not as gossip, but as a question with dangerous implications. Could the Queen's household pressure a private family member into surrendering a personally controlled jewel? Could a royal request outweigh a completed gift? Charles understood that intervening for Camilla might protect her dignity for one evening, yet damage something far more important: the belief that the family's personal boundaries still mattered inside the monarchy. The king received a private legal briefing, confirming that the Royal Emerald Brooch had never belonged to the crown jewels or the royal collection. The crown jewels are ceremonial objects owned by the state and used for major royal occasions, while the royal collection is the wider group of artworks and historic items held for the monarchy. This emerald piece belonged outside both systems, which meant Zara had every right to give it away without sovereign approval. Charles also learned that challenging the transfer could place him against Princess Anne, Sophie, Prince Edward, and Zara at the same time. One brooch was threatening to divide several branches of the family. The monarch read the transfer document alone at his desk. When he reached Sophie's signed acceptance, he removed his glasses, placed them beside the file, and said nothing while an aide waited. Camilla later entered and urged her husband to consider what the rejection would mean publicly. She told him that appearing at the Commonwealth reception without the emerald would make her look diminished, as though the family itself had refused to recognize her authority. Charles understood the humiliation, but he could not ignore the demand hidden beneath it. He told the Queen that defending the crown could not mean controlling every act of affection inside the family. Legal advisors had already confirmed through their written opinion that the transfer became final the moment Sophie accepted the gift. Any pressure to reverse it could be seen as royal coercion, the use of institutional power to force a private person into surrendering something legally theirs. Then another message arrived. Princess Anne sent a handwritten note containing only one sentence. A gift made freely should remain free. Charles read it twice. He understood that it was not merely advice, it was a boundary. Camilla watched him close the file, and the silence between them hardened. The king called his private secretary and gave the decision clearly. No intervention would be made. The rejected request would remain closed, and Sophie's ownership must be respected by every royal household. Zara was protected. The gift stood. Yet when Camilla realized her husband had chosen neutrality over her pride, her expression changed. She no longer saw the ruling as a legal defeat. She saw it as betrayal from within her own marriage. Charles had settled the question of ownership, but inside Clarence's house, the emotional cost of his decision was only beginning to emerge. Camilla had survived public hostility, private exclusion, and years of uncertainty before reaching the throne beside Charles. Yet the rejection of one brooch, wounded her in a place ceremony, could not protect. Zara had denied her. Sophie had been chosen over her. Anne had remained silent. Charles had refused to intervene. For the first time since becoming queen, Camilla confronted a reality no title could disguise. Acceptance within the institution did not guarantee affection within the family. Preparations for the Commonwealth reception continued, but every detail now felt wrong. The emerald gown had been selected around the brooch, and the matching accessories had been chosen to make the jewel the center of the queen's appearance. A Commonwealth reception is a formal royal gathering for representatives from nations connected through the Commonwealth, making every symbol of status carefully planned. Now the entire wardrobe had to be changed. While Sophie remained scheduled to attend the same event only days after receiving the piece Camilla had been denied. The queen stood before the open jewelry cabinet as her dresser presented 3 alternatives. She touched none of them. After a long silence, she lifted the emerald fabric swatch from the table and tore it once through the center. Her anger was not truly aimed at Sophie. It was aimed at the message behind Zara's choice. Camilla believed an informal circle of trust had formed inside the family, one that included Anne, Zara, and the Duchess of Edinburgh, while excluding the monarch herself. Charles entered after learning that his wife had cancelled a rehearsal. She asked whether he would have remained neutral if Princess Anne had been denied something by another branch of the family. The king did not answer immediately. That hesitation cut deeper than any legal ruling. To Camilla, it confirmed that her husband understood the rejection, but still would not stand beside her. A senior aide then suggested issuing private guidance that Sophie should not wear the brooch at the reception. Such guidance would be an unofficial palace instruction, carrying pressure without openly challenging ownership. It would preserve the queen's dignity without demanding the jewel's return. For a moment, Camilla considered it. Then the aide received new information. Sophie had already chosen not to wear the emerald piece. Her restraint was voluntary. The decision removed Camilla's final excuse for intervention and left her facing an uncomfortable truth. The woman she feared might triumph over her had refused to do so. Sophie, meanwhile, sat with Prince Edward at Bagshot Park and admitted that she felt guilty for becoming the center of a conflict she had never sought. Her husband listened before telling her that returning the gift would punish Zara for speaking honestly. The trusted confidant knew he was right, yet the burden remained. She asked for a private meeting with Zara, without aides, spouses, or palace officials, to decide whether the brooch should remain hers. Away from royal offices and ceremonial calculations, the two women would now confront the only question that truly mattered: whether their bond could survive the burden of the gift. There were no secretaries in the room, no legal files on the table, and no royal titles spoken between them. Sophie arrived carrying the emerald brooch in its velvet case, prepared to give it back if keeping it meant dividing the family. Zara had anticipated the gesture. What neither woman expected was how quickly the conversation would strip away the palace dispute and reveal the deeper truth. The jewel mattered only because of what their loyalty had already survived. Sophie met Zara privately at Gatcombe Park. while Edward and Mike remained elsewhere so no husband, aide, or palace official could influence what followed. The trusted confidant admitted that she had no wish to humiliate Camilla or appear to compete with the queen. She had spent years protecting royal unity, and now she feared the gift might damage the very family she had tried to serve. Sophie placed the velvet case on the table and pushed it toward Zara. She did not open it. Zara immediately pushed it back and said surrendering the brooch would turn gratitude into an apology. The words broke through Sophie's restraint. Her eyes filled, as she confessed, through their private conversation, that being moved at Windsor had hurt far more than she had allowed anyone to see. She had remained silent because speaking might have made her appear ambitious, bitter, or disloyal. Zara listened without interrupting. Then she admitted that anger had influenced the timing of the gift. The ceremony, Camilla's request, and the pressure surrounding the jewel had forced her to act. But anger had not chosen the recipient. Sophie had earned her trust long before the Queen's loan bid ever arrived. Zara then revealed a promise preserved within Princess Anne's family. The brooch had always been meant to pass to a woman who served, without treating service as entitlement. That private understanding gave the transfer a meaning far beyond palace rivalry. The emerald was not being used to punish Camilla. It was being placed where Zara believed its values had already been proven. Sophie finally accepted that returning it would not heal the family. It would erase the truth behind the gift. She decided to keep the brooch, but she would never use it as a weapon. Her first appearance wearing it would not be at a state banquet or grand royal ceremony. A state ceremony is a formal event representing the crown at the highest public level. Instead, she would wear it at a charitable engagement, supporting women rebuilding their lives after hardship. Zara opened the case, lifted the emerald piece, and fastened it briefly to Sophie's jacket herself. In that moment, the jewel stopped being a symbol of conflict and became a promise between them. Yet news of Sophie's chosen first appearance soon reached the press, and the private act of loyalty was about to become a national judgment. When the emerald finally appeared in public, it did not merely decorate Sophie's coat, it gave the entire country an image through which to judge the conflict. The public had heard fragments of the dispute, but one photograph transformed speculation into a powerful national story. Sophie stepped from her car at the Edinburgh Women's Renewal Centre, wearing the Royal Emerald Brooch against a simple cream coat. There was no state banquet, no procession, and no attempt at grandeur, yet the image carried more force than any palace statement. It showed the jewel exactly where Zara believed it belonged, beside service rather than status. The palace confirmed in a brief written statement that Sophie had received the brooch as a personal gift from Zara, but it refused to discuss Camilla's rejected request. That restraint was deliberate. The household hoped silence would contain the conflict before it became a public battle between senior women inside the family. Royal commentators moved quickly. They connected the transfer with Sophie's growing responsibilities and Zara's long trust in the Edinburgh household, meaning the family branch led by Prince Edward and his wife. To many, the gift no longer looked like a simple exchange of jewelry. It looked like recognition earned through years of dependable service. The London Chronicle captured that feeling with brutal clarity. Its morning edition carried a full-width photograph of Sophie entering the center beneath the headline, "The Emerald Choice. Service wins the family's trust." By evening, broadcaster Eleanor March sharpened the message further during a recorded royal special, describing the brooch as a jewel that moved not through rank, but through respect. The sentence spread across social media and morning programs, turning one private gift into a national verdict. Sophie saw the newspaper after the engagement, while seated in a small office at the center. She did not smile. The trusted confidant folded the front page inward and asked whether the organization's work had received equal coverage. Her discomfort mattered. She had refused to turn the jewel into a victory, even as the public was doing it for her. Camilla watched the broadcast at Clarence's house. When Sophie's photograph appeared, the Queen lowered the volume and told her aide not to issue a rebuttal. That choice marked the first real shift in her response. She understood that resistance would no longer protect her dignity. It would deepen the damage. Charles then approved a short palace statement praising Sophie's charitable work while avoiding the jewelry dispute completely. The king's wording made the monarchy's direction clear. Service would be elevated, and rivalry would not. Zara received hundreds of supportive messages, but refused every interview request. In a private conversation with Princess Anne, she said the brooch had already expressed everything she intended. Anne agreed that silence now carried more strength than another attack. Yet one final act remained. The public had chosen its meaning, but the family still had to decide whether that meaning would heal the wound or harden it forever. The nation had chosen its meaning for the emerald, but the monarchy's final verdict would be delivered in a quieter room, where Camilla and Sophie met without witnesses. The final chapter did not unfold before cameras or beneath palace chandeliers. It happened during a private meeting between Sophie and Camilla, two women who understood what it meant to enter the royal family from the outside and spend years earning a place within it. The emerald brooch remained absent from the room. That absence mattered. For once, they were forced to speak not about jewelry, ceremony, or rank, but about the hurt concealed beneath all three. Sophie had requested the meeting because she refused to let silence become permanent hostility. Camilla agreed only after accepting that public opposition to the gift had ended, and Charles would not reopen Zara's decision. They met alone at Clarence's house, the royal residence where the king and queen conduct private and official business, while the brooch remained at Bagshot Park, so the conversation could not become another negotiation over ownership. Camilla poured tea, but left her own cup untouched. She told Sophie that the rejection had made years of royal service feel meaningless, as though reaching the throne had still failed to secure a genuine place inside the family. Sophie did not dismiss that pain. The trusted confidant admitted that her own service had often required accepting smaller positions without protest. Through their private conversation, she described the Windsor ceremony, the sudden instruction that moved her down the receiving line, and the humiliation of standing silent while everyone behaved as though nothing had happened. Camilla did not defend the choice. The queen acknowledged that her determination to protect the visibility of her role had caused her to overlook the dignity of another woman carrying out hers. Then she made the decision final. She would never request the Royal Emerald Brooch again, challenge Sophie's ownership, or restrict where it could be worn. The rejection was accepted. Sophie answered that she had never viewed the gift as a victory over Camilla. She kept it because returning it would deny Zara's gratitude and repeat the same pattern of allowing hierarchy to silence personal truth. Charles maintained his non-intervention policy, meaning the crown would not use royal authority to interfere in a private family gift. Zara's right remained protected, Anne's boundary stood, and Camilla's household withdrew every informal attempt to influence the jewel's use. Before Sophie left, Camilla opened the door herself and told her to wear the brooch proudly at the next engagement. Sophie thanked her. They parted without warmth, but also without hostility. The emerald had delivered its verdict. The crown could grant position, but it could not manufacture trust. Sophie received the jewel because loyalty had been shown quietly, consistently, and without expectation of reward. Camilla lost access to it, yet gained an understanding she could no longer avoid. Zara proved that genuine respect moves through a family by choice, never by command. And so the emerald found its permanent home, not with the woman who requested its authority, but with the woman whose quiet loyalty had already earned its meaning. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.